Hi, welcome back to the Healthy Running Podcast. So here, Owen Everard, and I'm delighted to have the new co-host, John Murphy. John has worked with a number of key GAA teams, obviously Kilkenny under-20s, they won the All-Ireland, and is a very good runner himself. And just a really good person who, when I've had him in the clinic, we just had really good convos. So when I was thinking about the podcast and who I wanted to kind of chat around some of the ideas if we don't have a set guest, it was John. So yeah, great to have you now.
Thanks very much, Owen. Yeah, it's great to be asked on.
So what I thought we'd talk about today, as you said, was going to talk about some kind of key running injuries. We might do that as a series, and today we might go plantar fasciitis, Achilles pain, shin pain, and I can just talk through my my thoughts, see what you think, and then get some of your expertise on structure. So structure of a gym program. One, we'll talk about the Alvar Males hierarchy pyramid. How do you get to speed or strength, and how, if someone would say starting as a teenager, what they would do. I know you've worked a lot with say camogie teams or underage teams as well. So I thought we could chat about that. And then in structure, in the actual gym, I find that a lot of people one, they don't have an idea about what to do. But then secondly, they actually don't have a freaking clue about how to structure the actual gym. So sure, we'll get cracking with the first thing, which I was thinking was just lower leg injuries, plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, shin splints. These are common running injuries, and I would have been on other podcasts and we would have talked about it, that with these injuries, a lot of times what can occur is they're basically overloads of the passive structures. So the passive structures are the structures that we have naturally. Your tendon is always going to give you support. Your plantar fascia is always going to give you support. Even the shin splints, which is essentially where the muscle attaches to the bone. So it's kind of nearly you could nearly think of it as a tendon issue, but it doesn't propel the muscle or anything. It's medial tibial traction. So it's where they attach. So what's happening is those passive structures, like the joints or the ligaments or the tendons, are getting overloaded. And we'll talk about other, we might talk about knee injuries next week, then hip and back injuries. But what you'll see is that there's a common theme, that it's there's three systems that should keep you strong. So you should have your passive systems there anyway, but your muscular system, and then the control system, the nervous system, should kind of tell the muscles when to switch on. And when they're working correctly, what happens then is that the muscular system is taking pressure off the passive system. So instead of the passive system having to take all the load, say in a run, the muscular system is switched on, the muscles of the feet are switched on, the hamstrings, the glutes are taking a lot more pressure, and then that can help take pressure off the lower leg. So when we're thinking about, so that's what's happening. Say with the plantar, it's where the plantar attaches to the bottom of the foot can just get a bit irritated because it's getting pulled a little bit too much. Where the Achilles, it can be even the insertion or in the middle of the Achilles can be just overloaded, and that causes the tendon to kind of start to break down a little bit. So why do we want to release off the plantar fascia and release off, say, the calf that gets tight? There's a few things I think that are really overlooked, and we'll talk in a minute about if you have these things, what you can do. But one thing that's majorly overlooked is the fact that these areas in general are overloaded, and that's why they're breaking down. So you have someone they're overloaded, causing an issue, and what we want is basically, rather than just purely work on the strengthening of these areas, so with Achilles tendons, for example, everyone's go-to is heel drops, heel raises, work that completely. But it's all right, there's a place for that and we can talk about it. But before that, I feel it's I have much more success with single leg deadlifts and holding them for 5 or 10 seconds. So we're that'll get the feet muscles burning, the glutes and the hamstrings working a lot more, and then get the balance working. And then if these other areas, one, you're kind of activating the muscles, but not in a way that's still working that area, you're working like, say, isometrically, it then can, it naturally just takes the pressure off those areas, gets other places working, which really steps the healing. What do you think of that? I know it's a bit of a rant, but...
Oh, I'd agree fully. Like say you've mentioned there the single leg deadlift and holding that for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
If you really focus on pushing your big toe into the ground.
Yes.
Like actually bringing your foot into the movement, and then as you come to the top of the movement, driving up and trying to stand on your big toe.
Yes, yeah.
Like that's, obviously you're working your posterior chain, but you're also working your gastro and its lesser center soleus there.
Yeah,
major
and your foot muscles.
And
so
your foot muscles.
You really emphasize that pushing into the foot.
And some people struggle sometimes stability-wise, I find, with the single leg deadlift.
Yes.
But sometimes when you cue them to actually dig the big toe into the ground, it can help them stabilise.
Yeah.
Bringing in the foot muscles, bringing in more obviously than the calf muscles.
Yeah.
And obviously your Achilles. And then it's basically like an entire lower limb movement.
Yeah.
It's obviously just your hamstring, glutes, but also calves and your feet are brought into it as well.
Yeah. There's actually good you said that, because I haven't done it as much, but there's one where you get like, you know, like your mini band, and you put it underneath the big toe, and then you stretch the band and you put it through the other foot.
Yes.
And then you try lift your heels, so you're lifting your heels off the ground with the band there.
Yes.
With that idea of that, obviously if I peel that foot off the ground, the band's going to pull back.
Yeah.
So it's getting that idea of like just have it underneath the toe and push that toe into the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Then another one, and it's one come to use more and more in the program, and I do, would be a split squat hold with a floating heel though on a plate.
Yeah.
And as you're in the split squat position, raising up, pushing your knee forward up onto your toes.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Another variation that's been, say, similar to single leg deadlift, that's good for combating, say, ankle, calf, Achilles issues, but also working the entire lower limb.
Yeah, and at least then if you're working, say, so like you have it up on a step and you're like in a split squat and you're lifting, so you are working the Achilles, like working the calf complex there.
Yeah.
But at least, as I said, you're doing it in a position where you're kind of forcing the rest of the leg to work, because it's in that, say, split stance. If you're in that position and then you're lifting the leg, it's like, okay, now you can work it. The other thing is, I really like working these things isometrically. The only time so you can lift the leg, the rest of the leg's working. The only time I'll work heel drops or heel raises into a program is someone that's had really chronic Achilles, because what I'm kind of trying to do then is there's like a few like different kind of sheets of the Achilles, and you're really trying to give it like a micro massage in there. Now, if you have Achilles tendinopathy right at the insertion, so like down by the heel, the last thing you want to be doing is compressing that. So if you have it down at the heel, I see people come in and all they're doing is hanging down on the step like a stretch, and it's like, right, you're compressing the tissue there and causing further irritation. So it's like, the amount of times when people come in, I'm like, cut out all your heel drops, heel raises, add like your single leg deadlift, add some bridging on the ground. Like we do it in the Pilates a lot, that like, you know, a lot of times, one of the reasons with the Pilates, it was like, the things that work for leg injuries are nearly the same things that work for hip or knee, because they're like, when you're running, these are the areas that tend to get overloaded and there's other areas that tend to get weak. What do you think then about like, what kind of releases would you do with those kind of like, you know, calf, I suppose plantar, just roll the bottom of the foot? Roll
the bottom of the foot really would be, so depending on your tolerance to pain, from tennis ball to slitter to golf ball, if really. Yeah,
I don't like the golf ball. I like a slitter, I like a hockey ball. Golf ball can be a bit too small for me. It depends. You want to be like the likes of yourself or myself, like it's grand, but I feel like you want to know, like it's very easy to go nearly too hard in there and nearly cause a little bit of damage. I feel like if you go for a bigger ball, you can put a lot more pressure on it without getting that like really small area that could go right down onto it. So just, I would always be careful on that one.
What I found as well, I know it's maybe not a release, but I find for those issues, loading to a degree almost improves it, I find.
Oh, yes.
I've struggled with Achilles issues, and
Yes.
I got a lot of benefit out of like long yielding isometrics.
Yes.
Like maybe 3 sets of 30-second holds.
Yeah.
Um,
In what position?
So a different position. So I might be seated with a weights plate on my knee and
Yeah.
just push up.
Yes.
And push in, and depending on the force, so I might do a 30 seconds, so it's just a 70% push
Yeah.
for the 30 seconds. If I go for 10 seconds, it might be a 90% push.
Yes.
I might do it in a split stance either. I may also do it in a rack, pressed up, hands pushed up into a rack, or
Yeah.
pushed up under a barbell.
Yeah, so you can't move.
So I can't move, and I'm able to put force into the ground in a running position. And my
Yes.
knees push forward, mid-foot, big toe pushed into the ground.
Yeah, yeah,
Actually
yeah.
in the position I'm running in, whereas when you're doing heel drops, you're never running in that
Exactly.
position. And for like Alex Natera is an Australian S&C, has done a lot of research and programming on like long yielding isometrics for knee and calf issues. And I find from my program that it has actually made a big difference.
Yes.
So it's not a release, but I just actually find load
Yeah.
to a certain degree.
I think, and load is such a big one, like where people sometimes come in, if they've had Achilles issues, it's hard to tell them, it's like, listen, you're going to be about 12 weeks cleaning this up, but that doesn't mean you're going to be 12 weeks out with nothing.
Yeah.
Once the pain, there's a couple of things I do. I would try and encourage people to kind of run if they can. A couple of things you do is, one, make sure the pain isn't more than like 3 out of 10. Second one is, you shouldn't be altering your running style. So if you're limping or you're, walk until you can run, and then if it's under 3 out of 10. But if you're like, when running, it's like you visibly look different, it's like you're going to cause, if not the Achilles or the plantar to be an issue, you're going to cause the pain up the body. Something else is going to go wrong.
Of course, yeah.
And then lastly, so say it's 3 out of 10 pain, less than 3 out of 10 pain, so it might be just a niggle, run through it, no problem. As long as it's a niggle, it's not affecting how changing the way you're running. And then third, the next day you wake up, it's no worse than it was the day before. And if you have those 3 things, knowing that like you're going to have it for a longer period, but you're going to be getting up your volume, and then when you're at the volume you want to be, hopefully the pain should then start decreasing again. Because the worst thing you see, isn't it, where people just take rest for 2 weeks, it feels better, they go back, and within a week it's just back to where it was before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like I think that load is really important.
Absolutely. I'd say that with, say, Achilles issues, like athletes I found can catastrophize and think maybe they're not progressing, but like say if they can get through a certain training session, still be in pain, but their tolerance a week later, maybe 5% better.
Yeah.
That is progress. Like it's something that's not going to get better overnight. It's to reassure athletes that it's to constantly be able to build a little bit more tolerance.
Yeah.
And it does improve, but it just does, unfortunately, it takes time.
Especially, exactly. It's knowing what you have. I did a great podcast with Kira, my sister, on this different narratives around an injury, like how people approach an injury, and like it's a way of like getting stronger. Like say some people can do my Pilates just because of the injury, and then you can get like a lot stronger, you can improve a lot of things that you didn't even know, or just get different types of training. But that's so true. It's like you can have people come back in and be like, oh, my Achilles is still sore, but it's like you were running say 10 miles a week, or you were on off like for a couple of months, but now you're running say 5 or 6 days a week and you're doing 40 miles. And so it's not, even though the pain might be similar, say it's like that, it's still niggly. It's like, as you said, if you can like nearly have a diary of like where you were to where you are now, and if the pain hasn't come up, it's like you're progressing.
Absolutely.
And then when we can scale it off. This is great actually having just to chat, that way, because like, when you're on your own, sometimes I'd find you're chatting to the camera and you're like, all right, is that making sense or is that going? Okay, other things. So definitely loading it. And as we said, that 3 out of 10 doesn't change how you move. I think definitely getting the other areas working, like as I said, in the Pilates, it's like, or anyway, it's like glute. I do like little specialized rehab for people with these. And the ones for plantar, the mobility stuff is slightly different, like roll the bottom of the foot, roll your Achilles, like you're pushing away. But shin splints, plantar, Achilles tendon, it's single leg deadlifts for me, it's split squats, maybe with the holes, the isometric holes. Hadn't done a lot of like with a plate pushing up, but I could definitely see a place for that. Much more than the heel drops, heel raises. Heel drops, heel raises are definitely out if it's on the bottom of the heel where you get your pain, because that's going to compress the tissue together and make that worse. And it's like, there's like a couple of studies obviously that show heel drops, heel raises work or they're effective, but like it's only one approach, and if you've been doing that and it's not getting any better, it's like you got to switch it up. Like,
absolutely.
So other things, I'd always like compression socks. Don't know if there's much research behind it. I actually have my bad boys on now. Just really good to release off the legs. Bringing a hockey ball to bed, putting it in around that Achilles and like around that soleus and the gastroc, like keeping that released off. You know, I'll literally be in bed between the two bellies of the calf is like the best place I find, and then just rotating the ankles. And then obviously working on your balance as well, getting that foot. And I think that one is nice where like putting a stretch and try and keep that big toe down, but just working on that balance a lot, where you want it that the muscles are burning, that you feel like I can't stand any longer. And then that's the magic sauce, I think, for Achilles. I think that's good. I think that's a nice little like anything else I would do. Okay, like compression socks I would definitely go for. I have orthotics. Like I recommend people, if you've tried, like it's funny, I'd recommend both barefoot running sometimes and orthotics, you know, that way, like so insoles. So just the thing of like, if it is inflamed, sometimes it's holding it up when you're running, and then don't wear them, like wearing socks around the house or adding a little bit of barefoot running as well can kind of wake up the foot muscles. Do you do any of that, or what do you think of it?
I've a little bit of barefoot running, maybe warm down after a running session.
That's a great time to do it, I think.
A 5-minute jog on grass.
So and see how you feel with it. Like, you know, a lot of times I never do any more than 10 minutes, but some people are like, oh no, it won't be for me, or I won't. It's like, just try it. Like, take off your shoes and your socks, run cooling down, or 10 minutes in an easy run. If anything, it breaks up the run a little bit, you know, it just makes it, you have like 10 minutes and then you're like, okay, I only have 20 minutes left now, or whatever. So I do find that can be effective. And then I have my insoles, because I feel like people can be very one way or the other, like that, you know, all for something or then not for it at all. Do you know? Okay, so we might then chat about just secondly, and then this has been a great one. So anything else you add on that before we go on, or?
Surface management, where you choose to train.
Sorry, this is great.
And I know, particular for say field sport athletes, their footwear in terms of in the middle of the summer, like wearing studs in the middle of the summer on rock hard ground. Even to a point, blades in the summer on some of the pitches. Sometimes you're just better off wearing runners.
100%. For field sports, it baffles me. Even in the winter, I know it's a bit wetter, like so, and depending on like if you're doing a small sided game, have your boots on. But like if you're in for a running session, invest in a pair of actual good runners.
Absolutely,
for yourself.
You
know, like that might suit your foot. Like, you know, you can see lads that come out and like, you know, runners that are not in any way designed for running.
Or even gym sessions, doing their plyometrics, doing them in Air Maxes. Or fashion runners, I call them.
100%.
And then it's like if you're serious about your training and serious about an athlete, like footwear is an important part of that.
Footwear is an important part, and as you said,
for a running sport, like
surface management, like trying to get on grass, because like, you know, like Newton's second or third law is like every action has an equal opposite reaction. So if you go into the ground, if the ground doesn't compress down, it means that all the forces come back into you. So if on the grass, it will compress a little bit. So it's just taking a little bit forward. Your muscles will have to naturally work a little bit harder to get you off the ground. And then like, I wouldn't go from 100% road, if you've been doing that, to 100% grass. That's going to be a load. But mixing that up just keeps the variety in the training. The other thing, when you said that then, is like watching your load. Like if you've gone from, I've mentioned this other places, like there's that acute to chronic workload ratio, which is, it's not the amount of training you do that causes injury, they find. It's sudden spikes in training. And people see that in terms of mileage, that like, okay, don't go from like very low mileage to high mileage, which is the case. You know, if you're doing that, get like massage on that, be vigilant on what you're doing. But that's also for like speed work, that's for any different types of training. So one thing I'd always say is like, if you're in a long training block, like you're training for like in the winter, a half marathon, a 10K, even a marathon, just keep in like one semi-speed session, you know, once every like say 3 weeks. Keep in your strides so that when you go back on the track, it's like the Achilles isn't getting like overloaded because you're now doing shorter stuff, getting ready for 5Ks.
Go back to May 2020 or June 2020, sorry, after the first COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
And most people, the whole 5K craze and fitness at home, and everyone was out running the roads. But I found from, say, field sports in particular, when they returned to the pitch, there was a huge spike.
We were seeing this though.
In lower limb injuries.
Yeah, 100%. And we were calling that before. I remember me and you, like, say, in the clinic just going like, because you were prepping with teams and I was working with teams as well. And it was like, we were keeping these speed sessions in and we're like, people are going to be in bits because all they're doing for field sports is longer, easy running, trying to get 5Ks down.
Yeah.
But not preparing the body for what they're going to use.
Exactly.
And exactly that. That's such a really good point where you got so many injuries because it wasn't like they weren't fit because they were doing more running, but they weren't doing it for what they were going to have to get ready for.
Like they weren't exposed to the speeds. Like say, if you're running a 5K in 20 minutes, that's a 4-minute kilometre, which is just about 4.3 metres per second.
Yeah.
Like in, say, in Gaelic Games, you're going to cover 1,500 to 2,000 metres of high-speed running, which is over 6 metres per second.
Yeah, exactly.
Top speeds of up to 9 metres per second, 10 metres per second.
Yeah.
If you haven't been preparing yourself for that, something's going to go wrong, and it did.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same then when like people are, if you're doing longer running, if you're going to go back to park runs, just keep a little bit of it in.
Absolutely.
It'll be even good for your running economy and that variation in your training. And then alternatively, if you know you're going to be doing a marathon, say in like September, but it's like February, just keep like every couple of weeks a little bit of a longer run in there. It doesn't have to be 2 hours, 2.5 hours, but like, you know, keep like an 80-minute run in there or a 90-minute run or some kind of little bit of a distance session, just so it's like, it's not completely foreign to the body. Like if you've done a 10-mile run as a long run, it's not that much harder to start building, say, 13 or 14 when you get back into your long running. But if your longest run has been 6 miles and then you got 16 weeks to get that back up to like 26, it's just a long way to go, you know, when you're used to it. So yeah. I think the train management, as you said, that's great. You see, I wouldn't have thought of that now, but that's a great one of adding extra stuff in. It's just like seeing what you're looking at down the road. And as you said, that COVID lockdown was such a good example of that.
But even the winter now, like say, people are training away.
Yeah.
And best intention, but sometimes they're leaving out the quicker stuff.
Yes.
Even your strides at the end of an easy run.
Yeah.
Still getting you turning over at a quicker rate.
100%.
Like 4 50-metre strides takes 5 minutes.
Yeah.
At the end of an easy run.
And if people are like, I don't have the time, I'm like, one, you'll actually be breathing heavier. So you're getting bigger aerobic benefit, but it takes nothing from the workout or session the next day. And it's like, just like cut the run short. If you're going to do a 50-minute run, it's like, just do a 45-minute run and add this in for 5 minutes.
Absolutely. And even at this stage, on a Monday, say, most people's session will be on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
On your easy run on a Monday, if you have your long run Sunday, easy run on a Monday, 30 minutes or 35 minutes, maybe 3 by 8 second hills.
Yes, exactly.
It almost serves as a potentiation effect for your main session the next
100%.
day.
100%. And what potentiation means for people is that like you're essentially like activating all the muscles. So the next day when you're doing your running session, it feels easier. Yeah, like that's perfect. I think it's just something, and a lot of these things are like habits. We'll talk about habits another day. Do you ever hear James Clear, that Atomic Habits book?
Yes.
Yeah, we must do.
Yes.
One thing he was talking about was that thing of like, we'll talk about another day, but the idea of like, if it's a new habit and you haven't got the benefits yet, you need to give yourself a reward, which I've been thinking about a bit more. It's like so good, like, you know, in terms of if you do a run have like a relaxing shower or a bubble bath, something that you really enjoy, or like a hot chocolate, or that way, yeah. But we'll talk about habits because it's actually an interesting one when you're starting. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next topic, which will be like putting gym programs together. I wanted to talk about two things, like one, how to structure the gym, because people want strength or power or speed, but it's like you can actually get into trouble because you don't put a decent structure together. Absolutely. And then secondly, what to do in a session, like what a session looks good like. And you have obviously a lot of expertise in this, so I'll say what I want, and I think we've chatted about this a lot, that we're on the same page. We might just put up like a picture of like Alva Male's hierarchy, and essentially what you're looking at is like on the base you want like good movement ability, and that's where we'll do stuff with the Pilates, that like just you can do the basic movement patterns. You can squat, you can lunge, you can hinge, move at your hips, you can with the back aware belt, like hold your core in a good alignment, so that like you can push and pull without like moving at the body. So we should have like, and if you can't do that, that's like step one. Now I know people also talk about like good nutrition, which I agree with, and good sleep, that like you're not going to get results without those things as well. But like if you can't do those, that's where you have to start, and that's where we start with the Pilates. And it's not a thing of like I see people kind of back to what we were talking about with the injury. Oh, I do this stretch. It's like a stretch isn't going to cut it. If I'm sitting down, like we're sitting here, if I'm sitting for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, it's like you get tight. Like that needs like good movement, really working the joints. And when we're talking about good movement, there's 3 things you're looking for, or 3 things can hamper good movement, which we can talk about. So this is the base. So if someone can't move well, you're looking at a mobility issue. They can't move through the joints. The main joints that get affected are the ankle should have good range of motion, the hip should have good range of motion, the upper back should have good range of motion. Now, the way we're designed as humans is that like if you can't move in those joints, we're always going to be able to move because we have to be able to hunt and get food. So that's why you see so many like knee issues and so many back issues, because we're moving excessively through the spine and through the knee. Like, so the knee should just like hinge up and down, but it buckles in, buckles out, and then people get either like chronic issues or it sets them up for like more like tears. And the same in the back, we're stiff through our hips, which means then like rather than being able to like sit and keep my core here, all of a sudden I'm moving through my back then because I can't like keep up into a good position. So that's the first thing you need for good movement patterns. But then you need stability. You need to be able to activate the muscles. And again, when we're doing the Pilates, like a lot, like the people who do it will testify for this, like we're burning the muscles. When people, it's like, oh, I do a 30-second stretch, I don't know what, it's like you're sitting all the time. We need to wake these things up. We need to wake them up. Like it needs good, 45 minutes for us, at least once a week, to really activate and wake these muscles up. And then that'll help with the movement that we get back. And then the last one is motor control, which is like the technique of the action. So sometimes you can activate the muscles, and that's my problem with a couple of problems with traditional Pilates. One is just the complete ignoring of the mechanics of the spine, where like people imprint the lower back on the ground and just forget like that should have a natural arch, a natural curve. So stuff like that, like forgetting the mechanics in lieu of just the muscles activating. But the second one then is that all we do is stay on the ground. You need then to transfer where you practice the movements. So like you've learned to move through the hips, you've learned to switch on the muscles. And that's going to give us the transfer over then. So when we're looking at that base of the pyramid, and again, we might actually do another injury site and then do further up the pyramid, keep people coming back that way. But that movement base is so key. And to get that good movement, you want good mobility, good activation of the muscles, and then work in the technique. And it works in that order. Like you want the mobility first, you want the kind of technique second, and then you want the motor control third. Is that what you start with when you're looking at, like, say, an S&C program for, say, someone starting?
Absolutely. So depending, we come in first, look about how they move. Like, so when lads come into us, or players, whatever teams you're working with, a lot of the emphasis is on putting size on players, and that's a big craze now. But there's absolutely no point in putting anyone under a barbell if they can't move properly.
Yes.
It's only going to hinder them in the long term. So like you mentioned about good squat technique.
Yes.
So I'm a big fan of a goblet squat.
Yes, exactly.
To build that pattern, like, I wouldn't really program traditional back squats.
Yeah, I don't like them either.
Players. Grease the groove with your goblet squat.
Yeah.
Maybe then, if you want to progress, go with a dumbbell front squat.
Yes.
And then possibly progress to a front squat.
Yeah.
Sometimes players or players we work with may lack the mobility, so maybe elevate their heels.
Yes,
make a big difference.
But like, this is another thing you can do where it's like, if you find one thing, sometimes people are so limited on what they know, so then they just like, they either ignore good movement and just like, oh, I'm going to squat with poor technique anyway. So you have these, YouTube or whatever exercises that, well, this is just a program you do.
Yeah.
Like, it's like squats. It's like they can't see beyond a squat. It's like, well, maybe if they did a split squat, or maybe they can hinge, or maybe they can like do a step up and they're fine. Or as you said, even it's like, let's go for a goblet squat. It doesn't always have to be like bar on your back. If you have poor technique, just kind of mill through it anyway. As you said, there's kind of easier variations you can do to start someone off.
And the big thing is, I think a lot of people now are maybe influenced by Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah.
And what looks great on that. But like, that's just for show, really.
Yes, exactly.
It's nothing to do with function, and really for a lot of people, for sports, the gym is about function, how to function better in your sport.
Well, a lot of times with the TikTok or Instagram, now I like actually looking at these things as well, but you got to remember, like, say if it's diet, like someone's saying like eat vegetables and keep it healthy, it's like, because we kind of all know that but we don't apply it, that's not going to get any views. If you were talking about like eat freaking, like, say bulletproof coffee, it's like, oh, put loads of like butter in your coffee. It's like shocking. So you're going to like look at that. So then people see what's getting views and they're going to do more of that. So like, if someone's like, look, like as you said, have good movement patterns or build it, that's not going to get much. Whereas someone doing some mad ass exercise and trying to replicate it will, even though it's not as effective.
It's like the old question of, what's your magic exercise to make me better?
Yes.
There isn't one, it's just consistency.
Yeah, big time.
It's the same there. Like, as you said, a 20 kilo dumbbell goblet squat isn't going to attract 100,000 views on Instagram.
Yeah.
A 200 kg barbell back squat where someone actually falls over at the bottom,
exactly,
get 1 million views.
Yeah.
But someone will probably be influenced to try that then because it look good.
Yeah, exactly.
Do it with terrible technique, probably go quarter depth.
Yeah.
And something's going more than likely going to go wrong.
Yeah. And a lot of times these people, like, there is a lot on like, or a technique, but it's hard to get studies on that just because for ethics to get through of like have terrible technique. And then people have different bodies, like that. Some people, like their either musculature can hold that, their joints are able to like withstand it. Like if I take a door there and smack it backwards off the hinge, it's not going to come off the hinge straight away. Or you bang a door shut like harder. Like, you'd be very unlucky if that first time that did that. But it's like at some stage, if you are lifting or moving poorly, you can't keep like going beyond the capacity of the thing, which they've done in biomechanical studies, and not think it's going to cause issues. The thing that's hard is to put that in a time frame where you can see that damage. Like me, if I'm slamming that door, it's like, well, okay, over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to slam that door shut hard and see, does it damage it? And if it doesn't damage it in that 4 weeks, it's like, well, slamming the door shut hard doesn't actually make any difference. And it's like, well, you just have it in too short a time. Or you didn't do it with enough force, So it's funny, and if you are trying to improve your movement, as I said, I know we do it on the Pilates, but it's like getting good movement, getting the stability, and then working, as you said, varying the types of movements you can do, like go for a goblet squat. And that will bring us to, we might just do the next one, which is called like work capacity or anatomical adaptation. And what you're trying to do with this one is get your body ready. So if I'm doing like gym programs with the back aware belts, say in our sports Pilates or whatever, a lot of them are work capacity. They're like short recovery, 12 reps, because we're just trying to generally build general strength or robustness. It's like before you start lifting heavier, like say five sets of 5 reps or whatever, you just want to make sure that their body's prepared for it. How do you think about that work capacity or anatomical adaptation phase then?
Major fan of it.
Yeah,
Major fan
yeah,
of it.
yeah.
And particularly, the more inexperienced you are, the more important it actually is.
Yes, yeah.
Particularly for younger athletes. If you're going straight into loading them heavy, I think there's more low hanging fruit to be picked really.
Yes.
If you start off with your work capacity circuits.
Yeah.
Example might be 6 exercises and build in a goblet squat and
Yeah.
maybe a dumbbell RDL coupled with some upper body movements.
Yes.
Something like 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off, 3 rounds.
Yeah.
A couple of times a week starting off, and then progress them into their strength movements.
Yeah. That's exactly
it. It can work very, very well.
Yeah, and you can go, we'll talk about, like, Jesus, time has flown here, so we'll actually nearly up, but we'll talk about that maybe next day, is that like, how we look at it is like maybe power block, strength block, and then a larger work capacity block.
Yeah.
And in the strength, you can say you can have a strength exercise that's not really working strength yet, but just getting the technique right, or a power exercise that's working on the technique. Mm-hmm. And then what you'll find is though, like, people they'll look physically stronger, they'll be stronger from just doing work capacity. Absolutely. You know, like you go, we were saying, like, or I'll say it, like, there's so many bluffers out there, so many people where they don't apply good science behind what they're doing. They would have seen someone else do something, or they come from like a different background and think, oh, this is the way you do it, like say a powerlifting background. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, you got to know what you're trying to achieve. If it's to look athletic or build like towards speed or power, well then it's important to like put layers on top of each other. And then you can mix and match depending on what your format. So when you're looking at work capacity then, like as I said, with the movement base, you're looking at stuff to improve the mobility, the stability, the motor control. That's what we do in Pilates. Yoga will be much better on the mobility side, bit on the stability, maybe not as much on the motor control. Light gym work, you can get the motor control. You might miss a little bit of the correctives. And we'll talk about how we structure. I think we'll do that next day. We'll talk about how we structure, because you should have all these elements in all the time and just top up the ones that are needed. And then for work capacity, generally you're talking, you said 4 exercises or 6.
4 to 6. And again, depending on the time of your season or
yes.
what your goals are. So obviously, if you're close to competition, work capacity, there's other things which are more important at that
exactly.
stage. But look at it now, for a lot of team sports, club championships finished maybe 4 weeks ago, some are just finishing now. Take a little break, get back into it.
Yeah.
Capacity, building that engine in every way
yes.
is really the key at the moment.
Yeah.
And
I've had it even with teams where if they were ideal athletes, we'd be doing more of the power strengths.
Yeah.
Like in the gym sense, but it's like they're not ideal athletes yet. They're only developing, so we stay on the work capacity for a year, and then the following year they were able to go quicker through different stages. So again, like, and then for runners in particular, I feel like staying on the work capacity side of things, the 3x12 reps, the 40 seconds on, you know, like, it's still like heavy enough, like a 20 kg dumbbell or a 15 kg dumbbell, like say 65% like weight reps of what you could do. It's really activating that muscles. It gets the best like testosterone or hormone responses, because short recovery, more reps, and then that allows for like better transfer over. That it's kind of a continuation of the Pilates or whatever, where it's like you're just activating the muscles so you can run like with better form, and we don't really need to work on like so much on max strength. But as you said, with team sports it's a bit different. You might want to move them up the chain a lot more.
You do, and like all year round. Again, it's dependent on where you are at the stage of the season.
Yeah.
But you're always going to have certain things in. Like you look now, so a lot of teams are a long way away from pitch sessions.
Yes.
You're still going to have a small sprinkling of speed work in, as you
Yes,
mentioned.
100%.
You're going to have a sprinkling of power work in.
Yeah, yeah.
Micro dosages. Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to have, a lot of teams won't be touching really max strength work at this stage.
Yeah, but you could, when I do it like, Jesus, I'll leave it here then, but like when I do it, I have an A block, which is power. So that could be, at this stage, it could be one exercise. It could be like light technique of some exercise, like say an Olympic lift with a barbell or a dumbbell, or if you're doing jumps, like something just to practice the technique.
Yeah.
One strength exercise, you know, like even like 3x5 of it, just to get, again, maybe just working the technique, so to get an idea of where we're going. And then we could have 2 sets of work capacity, which would be my C and D blocks. So it could be 4 exercises in C, or it could be 3 exercises in C, 3 exercises in D. That would be our 6, or it could be just 4 exercises there repeated, 3 to 4 sets of it.
Yeah.
And then what I would have is an E block, which would be correctives again. And that's like some of my core work, some of my technique work. And I would add that as a warm up as well. So it's kind of getting everything in. And then you're focusing on what you need the most at that time, but you're not forgetting the other stuff either.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found as well, technology and data collection and data interpretation is getting bigger and bigger.
Yes,
and like you mentioned there about what we program, but the way it's gone, you can get profiles on players and say,
yes, yeah, 100%.
Maybe if they're, say, jumping wise, power wise, are deficient, but
yes,
aerobically they might be very strong.
Yeah.
And then you can actually program that from the start of the off season. And you've made of a squad of, say, club 30 players, and you're able to individually assess them all. Okay, it takes a little bit of time at the start, but when you have the programs in place, then say you might have a midfielder aerobically will run all day, but power wise, speed wise, needs work.
Yes.
And you can address that in his programming. Where say you have a corner forward who's very quick, but his capacity is not able to sustain work rate for the intensity that you want for 60 minutes of a game.
Yes.
So you can actually program then that in the off season.
Yeah. Work on those thresholds, that like the things that they're poor at.
Yeah.
Straight away. That's actually great. Yeah. Like, and they're easier. These things are getting cheaper to get and easier to do. John, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. There might be a few cuts as we had a couple of issues, but hopefully you got some good information about like our Achilles, what to do with the lower leg injuries, and we've just started talking about how we structure, say, a gym program. I'm looking forward to some more of John's thoughts as we kind of go up the ladder. And then, as we said, we talk about that. We might even talk about that force velocity and different ways to do it. Yeah. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Again, this is sponsored by the Back Aware Sports Pilates. For a free trial, just look in the link, or for my book, Secrets of a Health, or How to Get to the Line in the Best Shape Possible, go to everardpilates.com/book.